All right, good to be here. Sam, thanks for flying in.
Absolutely, great to be here.
I was happy to pull you out of your retirement. So I'm excited to do this. Just quick intros. I'm Harpy. I am with Innovation Endeavors. We're an early stage investor. It was a fund that was started by Eric Schmidt maybe 15, 16 years ago, and my other partner, Dror Berman. And we invest early seed A and B. I invest in applied AI and software infrastructure. And before switching sides, I was a founder for about 18 years. I started 2 companies in wireless infra and data analytics. And innovation was actually an investor in my second company. So excited to be here with Sam. We invested in OWN in 2015. And I've been on the board for several years. So let's get into it.
Sure.
I think everybody knows how it ended, right? You guys were acquired by Salesforce for a very nice exit. I think what people don't know is how it started. And it started as a backup store in Herzliya, Tel Aviv. So I want to go back to that. Tell us about the story, how you intersect the team, and what did you think of it?
Sure. So it actually started while I was on vacation in Israel. And I had another backup company that I started many years ago and exited in 2011. Was at a venture fund for a little while. And we almost invested in an Israeli startup, but it fell through at the last minute for some tax complications. So shortly thereafter, I found myself planning a vacation to Israel with my family. And I said, oh, while I'm here, let me check out the startup ecosystem that I had heard a lot about. I had a network of basically zero in Israel, but realized that a friend of mine, an ex-colleague who had worked for the venture fund who invested in my first company, came to work for me. I went back to the venture fund, had quit his job, traveled the world, landed in Israel, and I called them up and said, hey, we haven't really seen each other in a couple of years. I'll be in Israel in a few weeks. Let's catch up over a beer. By the way, I'm at a venture fund. Do you know any startups I can meet? And he said, yeah, I'm actually just moved here. I'm looking for a job, meeting with tons of startups. There's a couple of guys that had started a backup company. If you want to tag along on my unofficial job interview, you're more than welcome. So I said, all right, that's a little weird, but why not? So on the way back to my hotel in Tel Aviv, I asked the tour van driver to pull over in this city I had never heard of called Herzliya. I get out at this coffee shop. I meet my friend Ori. We sit down with our founding CTO, Ariel, and 2 friends that had started this part-time project called OWN Backup. And about halfway through the 1-hour coffee, they turned to my friend Ori, said, please stop selling yourself. We're not hiring a sales guy. And they turned to me and said, we actually are hiring a CEO. Are you interested? And that 1-hour coffee completely ruined the rest of my vacation. But 10 years later, here we are.
Fascinating. What do you think of these guys? So this is a store that you walk into, and like, you want to be a CEO of this thing?
Yeah, it was actually, they had an interesting story. So they had a traditional disaster recovery lab, meaning you drop your cell phone in a puddle of water, your server's RAID array has a problem, and they were able to recover data from any physical digital media. And probably 13, 14 years ago now, customers started coming in and out of their lab saying, hey, you've gotten data back from me before when I lost it on my X device, but now I've lost something in the cloud. Facebook shut my account down, or I permanently deleted something in Gmail. Can you help? Well, they didn't have access to Facebook or Google servers, so in those days, nothing they could do. But after enough of those conversations, they said, oh, maybe there are some solutions we could work on. So they started the first cloud-to-cloud backup, I think in 2010. And fast forward 2.5 years, still a part-time project. But maybe a month or 2 before I landed in Israel on vacation, they wound up winning a large enterprise customer here in the US. And when that happened, they said, oh, it looks like we have a real business here. Let's go spin it out of the services company. Let's go focus on it full time. And let's go find a management team that has done this before. And that's when I showed up. So I was pretty fortunate where I was coming into a part-time project. They had a real customer, or they had a bunch of customers, but one big one. So like when I joined, we were kind of pretty close to product market fit. So I got lucky in timing.
Yeah, I remember I actually pulled up our iMemo, which is this investment memo thing that VCs write from 2015. And we led the Series A. And that was a grand total of $3.5 million Series A back in those days. And I think we did like $2.25 million or so. And 2 things stood out. I think at that time, you had 5 competitors that we had noted. 2 of them had gotten acquired. So it was not a slam dunk by any chance. It seemed crowded. It seemed like, backup, like what could be exciting about that? So I'm curious, like, how did you navigate that early product market fit, go to market? Were things working? Did you have to come in and say, okay, we're going to change direction, or we're going to keep on doubling down? How do you think about it?
Yeah, let me actually rewind a little bit even further to talk about my thoughts on the space, because your investment memo was wrong, but I actually had a wrong
Glad it
thought.
was. But glad we invested.
So my first company, we were one of the first, called it online backup services before cloud, but our software would run on the server of, think, a 20-person law firm. Every night, take the data, encrypt it, and send it to us, and we'd store it in 2 different data centers. And I vividly remember this back in 2008. We were in a board meeting, and a small conference room in Boston overlooking Boston Harbor, and we were just brainstorming. And the chairman of the board gets up, and on the whiteboard, in red marker, writes on the board, "Backup for Salesforce." And I stopped the board meeting. I said, "That's the dumbest idea I've ever heard." So pretty ironic. I thought it was a bad idea at first also, but a few years later, here we go. But I think over that time, I really felt that the market was huge.
Yeah.
Salesforce now has 250,000 customers. Every one of them should have a data protection strategy, and that's just Salesforce. And you think of all the other SaaS solutions out there, the same problem, the same vulnerabilities exist to your data, whether it's on your laptop, some AWS instance, or in a SaaS application. All the SaaS providers call it the same thing. It's a shared responsibility model. They're responsible for the platform. You're responsible for your own data. We liken it to an apartment building where the landlord's responsible for the infrastructure, the windows, the pipes, the elevators, but you're responsible for all the content within your own unit. So I really felt it was a huge market, even though very few people believed us back in those days. So you get a big market, that's number one. 2, is it a real problem? Well, yeah, we had lost data in Salesforce before. The guy that I mentioned that introduced me, he did get a job. He was our first CRO and was with us through 200 million in ARR. But when he was at the other venture fund, he was actually on their kind of go-to-market team, helping companies build sales best practices, Salesforce implementations, and he was kind of a consultant. So he knew that the problem existed. So big market, real problem. The next 2 things are, does this solution really solve the problem? So I met the founders. That meeting in Israel was October 29th of 2014. Spent the rest of the year evaluating, does this product really work? Like, my family business was using Salesforce, like, let's install it, let's install a few competitors, let's delete some data, can we get this back? So we determined, yeah, so big market, real problem, the solution works. The 4th thing is, can we build a company here? And really felt we could. So those things converged and decided to join and bring some friends along the way.
Yeah. My number 1 lesson from your journey has been simple is beautiful, and build a product that everybody needs, right? You don't have to overthink it. Pilots are easy. Nobody can say no to disaster recovery and backup. So let's talk about scaling a little bit. I remember like the market was coming to you.
Yeah.
And the pull was strong. So are there things that you did on the product side or the go-to-market side that proved out critical later on?
Yeah, I think 2 things I can think of. Number 1, there were 5 of us when I started. Myself, our co-founding CTO, his 2 friends, and Ori, who ran sales, marketing, and everything in between. The first thing was, we knew what we had. We knew the product worked. We had an enterprise customer ready. So the next few hires were in sales and marketing. I think our hire 6 was our first solution engineer. He was also customer support and 5 other things when you called our 800 number. But it was like, let's actually focus on go-to-market first. And then let's listen to our customers and let's continue to evolve the platform from then. So that was 1. Let's really invest there. And I think it was an odd time in Israel, which is where the company was technically based. Most companies or VCs back then thought, all right, we're going to build a great technology. We'll get a couple of customers. A good exit is $100 or $200 million. No one's buying revenue. They're just buying the technology, and we'll plug it into a Microsoft or a big company. I really felt we wanted to build a business, not just a product, so we focused on go-to-market from day 1. The second pivotal decision we made is, well, I should say two, was focus. I'm a big proponent of focus. When I started, we actually had the legacy products in social media, so we had backup for Facebook, Google, Twitter, Gmail, or Facebook, LinkedIn. No one's willing to pay for any of that stuff. We were very close to releasing a product to back up ServiceNow, and one of the first decisions I made was get rid of everything except the product that was generating money. It wasn't until we crossed like 100 million AR that we decided we had enough resources to actually expand from there. But on the go-to-market side, because we were so focused in and around the Salesforce ecosystem, one of the decisions we made early on was to hire first one person, then it wound up becoming a big team, that all they did was build the alliance and the relationship between us and Salesforce. So if you're building in and around an ecosystem, I think it's really important that it's someone's full-time job, not just me going to a meeting and have a great conversation, then don't have the resources to follow up. But you really need to invest, in my view, in these ecosystems, and we did that pretty early, and that was a pivotal inflection point for us.
Were you worried about like dancing with the gorilla here? I remember back when I was at GSB, Andy Grove, drew this picture on the diagram. I took a strategy class with him, and it was basically 4 circles and little tiny dots within it. So he's like, what are these big 4 circles? So it was basically, if you're dancing with these big giants, and the elephant sort of moves their foot, you can get crushed. So you kind of go all in on Salesforce. And were you worried that they could somehow compete with you?
It was a question at every board meeting, every investor meeting. It was not one of the top 10 things I worried about every day when I woke up. The average Salesforce AE has like 150 different products to sell, probably more than that. They were just never going to focus on this as well as we could. So, could it have been a problem? They wound up coming out with a competing product, didn't work. They took it off the market, did it again, really didn't work, and then decided they needed to acquire the best technology out there. So we knew it could be a risk, but in my view, ideas are worthless. It's all about execution, and we got up every day, and 1,000 people were trying to execute. How do we build the greatest backup product in the ecosystem? How do we get it in the hands of the 243,000 customers that don't yet have this solution? And that's all we did.
And on execution, I remember every board deck I ever saw from you was like 100+ pages. Yes. With like appendix and this and that. Certainly more comprehensive than any board deck that I sent to my investors. So it seemed like you measured everything. So talk about that. Like, how should people think about scaling and what systems and processes they should put in place as they go from 1 to 5 and then 5 to 20 and so on?
Well, this is being recorded, so I probably shouldn't say this, but I have 2 recommendations for board meetings. Yeah, actually, our last board decks were like 200 pages long. If there's enough data in there, we can just spend the entire time going through it, and they don't have time to ask questions. We also always, this is the important one, we always had these great board dinners the night before. Yes. And if the board members showed up hungover, again, it was much easier for me.
You should have told me this like 10 years ago.
Yeah, we did measure everything. Part of it, we were a Salesforce customer. Our AEs always knew if it's not in Salesforce, it didn't happen. But we used a lot of other systems. Well, Ori and I were just very, very metrics driven from the beginning, and investments we made, we wanted to make sure it paid off. And how do you move chess pieces around the table? And we really wanted to know how every aspect of the business was going, and hopefully proactively, identify problems before they happen, or be able to fix them quickly. And it's really hard to do that without data.
And how far did these metrics permeate through the organization?
Pretty far. I think that's one of the biggest challenges as you scale. So the advantage of my job is I had all the context. I saw everything from every department. We tried really hard to give that context to everyone in the company. In fact, we did almost 10, not quite monthly town halls, but let's call it 10 a year. And if a town hall was right after a board meeting, we would actually take that 100-page deck, we'd pare it down to what could fit in a 45-minute discussion, but we shared as much as we possibly could. Did every SDR remember every metric? No, but we really, really tried to share that. One, because that trust and that transparency helps build trust with our employee base. It helps people think about the decisions they're making better. but it's hard to make sure that everyone in the organization has the same level of detail that I did. But it's something we worked on a lot.
And was this coming from you? Did you have people around you? Like, when did you think this was important to do?
I think it started with me. And then I really tried to instill it in my leaders. When we didn't have a finance team until pretty late. We didn't have a CFO. For many years, we used an outsourced finance company in Israel. And I'll never forget this. I was running our model from day one. In fact, my first trip to Israel, when I officially joined the company, I had terrible jet lag. And I took a monitor back to my hotel room, and I was doing this gigantic Excel model, down to how much are we going to spend on coffee every month, things like that. And I ran the model for years. And in the end of, I think, 2018, I was sitting in our conference room of our finance company. And they had just moved to an office, and it was the wood floors, and our outsourced CFO got up to get a coffee, and I remember the sound of his footsteps. He gets up, and he says, "Do you need our help with, FP&A? Do you want us to run the budget for next year?" And I said, "Absolutely not. Like, that's my job. Like, I need to understand the business. I want my leaders to understand the business." So he walks out of the room, he goes 10 steps, he stops, and I remember the sound of his footsteps. He came back, he goes, "You're the only founder where our FP&A team is not doing this for you." He goes, "You're also the only company that's actually making their numbers." So I think it's really, really critical that I knew the business, and it was the way I thought about the business. Like any investment, not just are we buying coffee here, but everything we're doing ties back to some cell on some worksheet in this model, and it's the way I thought about the business, the way I wanted my leaders to think about it, and I want to instill that in every employee. So I tried to instill that from day one.
No, well said. So, talking of that, how do you think about culture? And it sounds like this was an important part of the culture. How do you think about culture? How do you think about people? And would you have any advice on how to build strong operating teams?
Culture is hugely important, and that drives great people. My job was relatively easy. Make sure we have a huge TAM, which we did. You guys thought our TAM was 3 million. I thought it was about 30 billion, so a little off there. But make sure you have a big TAM.
The Series A was 3.5 billion, which is now like a pre-seed.
Make sure you have a huge TAM. Set a mission and a vision that is big and bold. Hire people far smarter than I am at every functional area around me, and make sure they're all working together towards that mission and vision. And a lot of that comes down to culture. Do you want to be with these people? Because this is a hard job, and everyone is really working their butts off. But you can't outsource culture. Culture is not something that HR owns. It's got to start, at the top. But everything we did, we talked about culture. How could this impact culture? What can we do to make it better? Every new employee I used to talk to, I'm like, look, you're all part of the culture. It's your job to call out your colleagues and commend them when they did something that upholds our values and was good. It's also your job to remind someone when they did something against that, that they shouldn't be doing that. So I think it's something we always focused on. It's really, really hard. I interviewed every employee through about probably 400 employees. I probably should have done it through 1,000. At some point I wasn't interviewing for technical skill. I trusted, the manager, but interviewing for cultural fit, I think, is really key. People are working their butts off, and if they're not enjoyable to be around and good energy, it's really hard to scale.
And how about building strong operating teams? Especially, I'm curious, in a 10-year journey, you probably had to rotate people.
Yes.
And up-level people, so.
Yes, it's one of the hardest things to do, but it's rare. I'm just going to pick on a sales leader, but this goes for probably every job in the company. It's very, very rare that a sales leader can scale from $1 to 200 million in revenue. Like, it just doesn't happen very often. It's the exception, certainly not the rule. There are great sales leaders that can go from 0 to 1 million, or 1 to 10 million, or 10 to 100. That person is probably not the person that's going to go from 100 to 200. That's perfectly fine. That person that's good at the 1 to 10, they should do that 5, 10 times in their career. They'll be super happy and they'll make a ton of money. right? If they're trying to get something way out of their comfort zone, they're probably going to be miserable. You're probably not going to be making your numbers, and it's not good for anyone. But my favorite story about this is I was at a conference, I think 2 summers ago, and there was a round table of CEOs, and then the topic was how to get from 1 to 10 billion. So it started, what does that mean? Is that valuation? Is that revenue? We decided it doesn't matter. Like, you're scaling through these big milestones. And at some point, the moderator said, all right, what's the hardest challenge you have to deal with? And I don't know how it came out, but almost everyone agreed, like, firing a founder or a key leader, it's just a gut-wrenching thing to do. Right? This person's been with you for years. They've worked their tail off. They've gotten you so much, but it's not the right person to get you from whatever you are today through the next milestone or 2. And it's just, you're up at night, you're thinking about it. It's really, really hard. So we all agreed on this, and then they asked, all right, once you've done it, who would have not wanted to do it 6 months prior? Right? It's always the right decision. It always takes too long. It's a terrible thing to do. And the moderator was a very, very successful entrepreneur who had almost taken a company public and then sold it and made an awful lot of money. And he wasn't trying to be condescending. He was totally agreeing with us. He goes, I agree. When I was running a 1,000-person company, it was the hardest thing to do. But now I own a professional sports team. And when I make a change to the roster, there's millions of angry fans tweeting at me that I'm a jerk. So I would die to go back to a 1,000-person software company, make a change like that. So that was a good perspective on that decision.
And maybe taking it to slightly earlier stage, one of the questions we always get from founders is, do I hire ahead of my needs? Do I hire a doer? Do I hire a manager? Do I hire a VP sales? Do I hire AEs? Or do I hire a director engineering? Do I hire VP engineering? I'm just wondering how you thought about that, because again, nobody has enough cash to be hiring like all the headcount.
Yep. I was always a fan of hiring people who have done it before. When you're growing,
so not smart athletes, but people who've done it before.
Done it before. And you may disagree, but one of our other investors actually, we had a great conversation. Look, we gave you a lot of money to go execute as fast as you can. We didn't give you a lot of money to go try. So why are you betting on someone that may be able to do it? Go buy the person that's done it before 2 or 3 times. That doesn't work in every role all the time. And I think, there are all kinds of decisions you make. What would it do to culture to, change a person out or bring someone that's, too many steps ahead of you. But generally, I think you bring someone that's done 1 or 2 steps beyond, and you'll just get there faster. But it's person dependent. I think it is important, by the way, when you're small, to bring in a sales leader, not just a great account executive who's going to be kind of a lone wolf and the reporting to the CEO. I think when you think you're at product market fit or close, figuring out how to operationalize, institutionalize the sales process is one of the most important things to do. And doing that too late, I think you wind up slowing down. You might get a few sales earlier on, but it's very, very hard to then scale that later. It's, in my view, much easier to start thinking about how you make this a process and scale as early as you possibly can.
Makes sense. I'll open up for Q&A in maybe 5-7 minutes, so think about that. Let's talk about, you're at $100+ million. And I remember there's not been a board meeting in the last, 5 years where we didn't talk about expansion. And we didn't talk about, can we do the same thing in ServiceNow, in Microsoft? Can we build AI on top of all the data that we have, and so on. So how should people think about Act 2, Act 3? How did you think about that?
For us, our original mission was to ensure that no company operating in the cloud would ever lose data. So that was, every SaaS application you're using. I think the last stat I heard was the average enterprise uses like 300 different SaaS applications, from Salesforce to Evernote or whatever. That's still an application. The data still needs to be protected. So for us, it was always a question of when we would expand, not if. But when you're growing 100% a year and the market's only single-digit penetrated, my view goes back to, all right, let's keep focusing on what's working. Why dilute ourselves? Why dilute the team? Why spend money in places where we know the market's there, we know the ROI, we know we can keep growing. But it was something I was constantly thinking about. And one of the hardest things to do is say no. people, I have an idea, we want to do this ecosystem. We're like, no, let's keep focusing on what we do best because it's working. And again, at some point you cross 100, that was our metric, like, all right, now it's really time to think, it's easier to think longer term then. The flywheel is running. Let me start thinking about what this business should be 2 years from now, 3 years from now. And I think when I felt I had a little more freedom to think longer term, it was time to expand. But it was a lot of saying no in the beginning and making sure we compressed what we were doing, not expanded.
And was there inertia, like, again, you had so much momentum around Salesforce, like when you tried to stand up these teams around ServiceNow and Microsoft and so on, like, how do you give them sort of enough oxygen?
It's hard. I don't know how well anyone in the audience knows the Salesforce ecosystem, but it's unique. If you've ever been to Dreamforce, for example, there's not many other enterprise or whatever software conferences where you have a stage and you're learning something and there's stuffed animals walking around. Right? That doesn't exist at Microsoft or ServiceNow. So we did a lot of research, but really we needed to speak a different language. The ServiceNow ecosystem, like the language is different. What the customers call things is very, very different. So we hired different people in the beginning. We screwed up at first when we thought we could just kind of plug and play exactly what we did in Salesforce to these other ecosystems, and then had to reboot it a bit. But it was a very calculated decision to start expanding, and maybe we should have done it sooner, but who knows?
Great. And how do you think about acquisitions along the way?
We did 3 acquisitions. One was a pure acqui-hire. One was an acqui-hire with some very specific IP, and then a real company that had product and revenue and those things. I think acquisitions can be a great way to expand. Integrations are incredibly complex. You're merging 2 technology sets, 2 cultures. That's probably the hardest thing, often another location. They can be extremely distracting. Mm-hmm. But of the 3, they work pretty well. We were looking at potentially one transformative acquisition towards the end. That would have been game changing. But they're something you should think about, but don't count on an acquisition transforming your business. I think that's the exception, not the rule.
Yeah, makes sense. So, I mean, towards the end, again, things are going very well. You're growing rapidly, and I think this company could have gone public, right? So why sell to Salesforce?
Yeah, we weren't looking to get sold. We weren't running an active process, but we had known the Salesforce team for years. The Salesforce Ventures team invested in us along with Innovation Endeavors in our seed round and continued to support us. By the end, we were one of the top 5 ISV partners they had. We had deep relationships into a number of parts of the organization. But they we were talking about, if there was another round, would they participate? And at some point, they said, well, why don't we just buy you? And, it wasn't 2021 anymore. The markets had changed a little bit. But what we really felt is that, as I said earlier, every one of the 250,000 customers should have what we were selling. And the fastest way to get our technology into the hands of every customer was through the Salesforce go-to-market distribution team. On top of that, especially for folks that came in early, it was a pretty damn good return in IRR. So it was a good outcome and good for our customers.
Yeah, no, we're certainly very happy. But how much did sort of Salesforce can compete with me?
Compete?
Yeah, was a factor that, okay, I am one of the largest ISVs in the space. These guys can, if I say no, they can turn around and compete with me. Like, did that?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a factor. And look, if they wanted to make our lives miserable, they could. But is this really going to be a strategic focus? They're talking about agents and AI, and I don't think they're going to turn the organization on a dime to just compete with us. But it was definitely a factor. It was one of the 10 things we kind of considered as we were considering the sale.
Cool. So what's next? I know it's only been 3 months or 4 months.
I don't know. My kids really want me to take at least a year off. We'll see if that happens. I'm running out of projects and rooms to redo in my house. Love meeting founders and seeing if I can give them some useless advice, but happy to help others. And I definitely have one more in me, and we'll see what happens. Like the last one showed up on vacation, so trying to travel and meet people, and we'll see where it goes.
Nice. Happy to open it up for audience Q&A. There's a lot in this story, so both from starting with a physical store to selling. So come on. Don't make me cold call people here. Now questions?
I think there's one over there.
I'll ask you a question. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's really hard for founders to make the decision. I think you just talked about the IPO versus selling now and raising. And when you've got strong conviction in your product as the founder, you love it and you just want to keep going. What are the determinants in choosing the right partner? And it's awesome to see your relationship that you're here on stage interviewing each other, and obviously it all worked out. But you hear so many stories where it doesn't.
So I'll take you back to when I was at this very early stage venture fund in between these two startups. We saw hundreds of presentations. It was almost like it was really an angel network. And every single one of the presentations would end with the same 2 slides. These are our 5-year financial projections. Don't worry, they're conservative. And this is our exit strategy. It was the logo of Google, Facebook, Microsoft, pick a few others. And invariably, I'd raise my hand and say, there's only 2 things I will guarantee you with 100% certainty. Number one, you're not going to meet those financial projections. In 99.9% of the cases, you're going to wildly miss. If you're the company of the decade, you're going to exceed them, but that's not accurate. And number 2, none of those companies are going to buy you. So I never believed in building a company for a particular exit strategy. If you're in a big market, put your head down, grow, focus on the business, and good things will happen along the way. And we were talking to bankers about an IPO, and this inbound offer came, and it was the right decision for us. The only caveat of that is the morning I wake up and it's not fun anymore. I might have changed that answer, but if you're growing a business and you have conviction, keep growing the business and focus on that, and something good will happen along the way.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add about working together is just like companies have culture, boards have culture as well. And I think Sam and team did a great job with sort of transparency, and we always knew that whether it's good or bad, we were getting the right sort of story. And I think that just engenders a lot of confidence. And here's the irony of it. Sometimes the better the companies do, the more dysfunctional the boards get. Right? Because, okay, this is the fund returner. So everybody kind of, is paying more attention and gloms onto it. And I think you did a great job, frankly, creating a very good culture on the board where I think we all brought in different perspectives, whether it was product or scaling, people, whatever. And we all disagreed plenty, but I think I can't remember when any time it was not collegiate.
No, I agree, and that's a really important point. I spent a lot of time, and I do reference calls for all of our investors, and the one thing I'll say is, yeah, you can pick a good fund, but more importantly, pick the right partner. I looked forward to our board meetings. I really enjoyed them. I enjoyed the conversations. I enjoyed everyone around the table, and that's a very important thing. Make sure you enjoy who you're working with on the board as much as the employees. Otherwise, it's just torture.
Yeah, and 2 things I'd add there, just having been on many boards, including for my own companies. I hate Zoom-only board meetings. There are many companies, especially remote companies, where they just do Zoom meetings for board, and you can't build a good board culture that way. Yeah. And invariably, something is going to, you're going to hit a bump. You're going to have a hard conversation, and I think having those board dinners
Totally agree.
And sort of building that rapport on the board goes a long way.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. The board dinner was more important than the meeting. Like the discussions happened the dinner night before. The meeting was going through the metrics. And even through COVID, if you remember, we had in-person board meetings. We flew everyone to New Jersey, and we had an outdoor board meeting. Their gift was a Canada Goose parka. But even through those times, I really valued getting people together in person.
I remember it was very cold. We sat in Sam's backyard in the middle of COVID and wore these parkas and did a board meeting.
Yeah.
Hi. You spoke about your decision of not partnering with Microsoft and others. Very interesting lens for me personally. Could you talk a little bit more around that, please, and your decision for doing so?
Well, we did partner with them. It was just much later on in the last couple of years. The decision, I think someone at Apple said it best. I don't know if it was Steve Jobs. Like, what makes them great is the 99 things they say no to build one product. It's all about focus. So, when I joined and we had a real enterprise customer and we were getting more in the Salesforce ecosystem, and there are hundreds of thousands of customers to go after. That's just my mentality is focus and execute. And it was just much easier to do in one ecosystem than the others. And maybe if we had started Microsoft or ServiceNow, it might have been different. But for me, it was 100% around focus until we had much more resources.
Thank you.
Hey, Sam, thank you. My question is actually somewhat similar, so let me ask you a slightly different question. If you knew a specific ecosystem to go into would be somewhat difficult, right? Would you ever pivot away completely from that ecosystem?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on what your other options are, but path of least resistance, keep things simple. If it's going to be a tough choice, unless it's more lucrative, I think there's a lot of factors to weigh there. But why do something hard if there's an easier path?
You spoke about hiring the sales leader early on the business. I wanted to know, what are some of the qualities you look at? And to give you a bit of context, we did kind of early on bring in a sales leader, but brought it from a bigger corporation. So different mechanics and different ideas. Just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Obviously, when you're hiring a sales leader, do they have a track record of meeting or beating plan? Hopefully beating plan. I mean, that's really important. In my view, though, probably the most important thing to look for is just simply how hard do they work. Like, there is no substitute for hard work when building a startup. It's grit. Are they up at 5 o'clock in the morning, checking email, staying late, well into the night? When we spent a stint in Tel Aviv at Microsoft had an accelerator for startups. And we were selling into the US. That was a market. We had a few customers in Israel, but really the US was the market. And everyone would leave, 6, 7 o'clock at night. It was a ghost town, except for our salesperson, Ori, who's our head of sales. And, when I came to Israel, I'd work 2 days. I mean, it was like 9 a.m. in Israel time, and we'd finish our day at the end of the US day. And we were the only people in the office at, midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, but we were the only company in that cohort closing deals. So there's a lot of technical qualities, but I hate to say it, there's no substitute for hard work, and that's my big thing.
Thank you for your talk. I'm Pian, founder of a startup called Emotions AI. We provide real-time AI sales teammate to help sales teams. Curious from your standpoint, how did you scale your sales? How did you make sure your sales teams be most effective as you're growing the company?
Both Ori and I had come from a background from a couple of VCs that really focused on kind of a traditional inside sales motion, SDR, BDR, into AEs, and we split the AEs into an SMB team, a mid-market team, and enterprise team before we did any verticalization. And it was kind of a scientific approach to it. Measure everything. We were measuring every stage of the funnel. We have, things not working in conversion. Is it a marketing problem? Is it somewhere down the road where an SDR isn't being effective? So it's all about measurement and then investing in those areas. We also invested very, very heavily in sales training. I'm a huge proponent of following a methodology. I don't care what the sales methodology is, but you need to make sure you're following the process. It's great to have a lone wolf sales rep that exceeds quota, but that's not replicable. So you really need to focus around process and make sure that your head of sales is really sticking to that and investing in training and bringing this person in, hopefully once a quarter, but certainly big event sales kickoff or something every year. So methodology, process, and measurement.
And how did you get the early customers before you hire your first salespeople?
We got some interest from the Salesforce App Exchange, but our big thing was in-person events. And one of our largest investors is Insight Partners. They have tens of $billions under management, huge portfolio. And I'll never forget, I think it was March 15th, the very beginning of COVID, our lead investor there called me up and said, hey, we've done an analysis of our portfolio. You're in the top 3. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. This is great, top 3. And he goes, of companies exposed to getting all their leads from in-person events, and the world just shut down. So you're kind of screwed. So we had to pivot pretty quickly to online, but we did a lot of events.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're over time, but let's make that a quick last question.
Yeah, thank you. Really great chat. Oh, wow, there's a bit of reverberation. Can you just speak to being category leading? I mean, you talked about being sort of the first to the market, and then some others like Salesforce, and also others in the ecosystem sort of copying. So what sort of made you unique from maybe a product or value proposition to stay ahead of the curve?
It worked, I can say. Many people tried. I remember one competitor, the product would back up, it couldn't restore.
Yeah, that's a good, the product worked. And I think our culture, actually, one of the things I was most proud of, we had like 5 times the number of AppExchange reviews as our closest competitor. But go read the reviews till this day. You can read 5-star reviews, product works, it's great, it does what it says on the box. But a lot of our reviews said the product works, but Josh and support was awesome. And what I was more proud of, the product works, but Jane, our sales rep, was not trying to sell me. I was really treated as a real partner. So I think it comes down to people and culture, and it's called whole product, which is not just the technology. It's every piece of it that goes around it. And I think it was our focus there that really differentiated us.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam.
Very good.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.